Warning, the following ZipRecruiter radio spot you are about to hear is going to be filled with F-words.
When you're hiring, we at ZipRecruiter know you can feel frustrated, forlorn even, like your efforts are futile, and you can spend a fortune trying to find fabulous people, only to get flooded with candidates who are just fine. Fortunately, ZipRecruiter figured out how to fix all that. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. With ZipRecruiter, you can forget your frustrations because we find the right people for your roles fast, which is our absolute favorite F word. In fact, 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day.
Fantastic.
So, whether you need to hire 4, 40, or 400 people, get ready to meet first-rate talent. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/zip to try ZipRecruiter for free. Don't forget, that's ZipRecruiter.com/zip. Finally, that's ZipRecruiter.com/zip.
Hey, warmer from Elo! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an absolutely excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, as we're going to be chatting with Riley Davis, who does such amazing work over at HXCBB, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. I know that he is very dialed in as everything that we've been seeing here in the offseason. We're going to be taking a look at some of the schools out there in the ACC that are more mid-tier that he feels like can surprise, because in the ACC, we've noticed that there has become quite a bit of a divide between the haves and the have-nots. We're going to be talking about some of these coaches that could have themselves a pretty rock-solid year number 2 as well. We're going to be really highlighting those Big Ten coaches and what they may be able to do this season. We're also going to be talking a little bit of mid-majors, as we're going to be looking at a few of these teams out there in the southeast part of the country that have done a good job this offseason. I know that High Point is going to be brought up among a few others. So we've got ourselves an amazing podcast today. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Well, I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, and please do fire those in. Everything is powered by EdgeBoost. EdgeBoost is making sure that bettors are able to access their funds whenever they want, wherever they want. Every single gambling transaction gets approved. As you utilize EdgeBoost, you're able to earn cashback rewards as well. And when you go to edgeboost.bet, utilize the promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G. That gets you a $1 match on your first deposit of up to $25. And now let's chat with our good friend Riley Davis, as he does such great work over at HXCBB. I know that he's doing some amazing work as well over at Sleepers Media. He is dialed in everything that we're seeing in this offseason, and he is preparing for this upcoming season. And you're able to follow my Twitter/X at his first name, Riley, and underscore, and then his last name, Davis, and the number 3 altogether. And Riley, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Of course, Greg. Always a fun time to be on here on Coast to Coast Hoops, talk a little beer reviews, talk some hoops as well. So appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. The beers have been going down very well. A lot from out there in the northeast part of the country. And I do think that it is going to be very interesting to see what we get out of some of these second and third year coaches as well. Because, Riley, I know this, when it comes to college basketball, there's a lot of expectations on coaches earlier on in the cycle. And just how do you take a look at some of these guys that either had a big year number 1 or maybe didn't have such a good one going into year number 2 and year number 3? Because I do think that sometimes that year number 1, whether that be to the positive or the negative, can be a little bit misleading.
Absolutely. I think one of the coaches who I'm most looking to see how they perform this year is Jake Diebler. When you're talking about those guys now entering his second full-time year on the job, of course, what got him the interim tag removed was Ohio State's good finish to that, I believe it was the 2023 Was it 2023 campaign? I'm mixing up my years.
2023-24. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate you on that one. Yeah, but last year obviously really disappointing. But this year sort of put up or shut up for Diebler when you look at the roster he's accumulated. He has Bruce Thornton coming back. He kept him out of the portal. And I think Thornton has been, maybe for those who follow the Big Ten, not really slept on, but maybe from a national perspective, one of the most slept on productive guards in the country. Just can truly score in a variety of ways and is about as proven as they come of a power conference guard. I know Junie Mobley, he played really well as a freshman and could have big things in store for year two. And then, of course, you have Dev Royal back. Christoph Tilly, I think, was one of the most underrated portal additions at the 5 spot, especially looking at how shallow this center class was. Being able to lock him down early, he's going to give them a good inside-out game. And even with Tilly in particular, I think you can't overlook just that he is a true 7-footer who's tipping the scale at over 240 pounds. Like, I know he's moving up from the WCC, but he already has that power conference size, and the physicality shouldn't wear on him at all, to where all in all, I like this roster a lot. Other than I wasn't crazy about the Gabe Cupps addition through the portal, but aside from that, Diebler's made some nice pieces. It's a really good starting 5 that you could see coalescing nicely if he can push all the buttons. But when you mention these coaches entering their second or third year, he's the one who's, I would say, like number one with a bullet in terms of we got to see something here.
Yep, absolutely. And for Ohio State, it was a disappointing year for them, not being able to make the NCAA tournament. I thought that was relatively rough. And then speaking of guys that had, in my opinion, a solid year number 1, but now he's in a year number 1 in another side, that'd be Indiana, as you've got Darren DeVries. He brings along his son Tucker DeVries, which I thought he did a good job over at West Virginia. I felt like they should have made the NCAA tournament, but now, as we know, expectations are going to be higher out there in Indiana, even though, let's call it what it is, has not necessarily been the most winning program over the last few years in Indiana. But how do you take a look at this program and how they're going to be able to shape themselves for this upcoming year? Because with Indiana, I think that they can have some success, but as we both know, that middle of the Big Ten is just so interesting and so tightly bunched.
Yeah, with Indiana, I think in a vacuum, I liked every move that they had. I thought all of their transfers that they accumulated, there was a clear vision there where even someone like Nick Dorn, I'm not the biggest Nick Dorn believer in the world. I think bringing him in where he's going to be we'll call him like the 7th or 8th guy, it's a good bet on at least the talent there. Maybe he becomes something more than that. Like, I really thought Tatum Conaway was impressive, especially you get a guy who is a point guard for a team that won its league and did so in a relatively dominant fashion. And then, of course, Lamar Wilkerson, who was one of the crown jewels of the portal. I like building around those two and having Tuck hopefully back healthy at the 3. Even Reed Bailey, I think he's probably the one I have the most concerns about translating up a level, but he's really skilled, a really good passer. And I think last year, aside from when it wasn't just the Javon Small show, West Virginia looked at its best when it sort of ran some stuff through Amani Hansberry. I thought DeVries did a good job of unlocking some of his playmaking ability that you could see him being able to do that with Reed Bailey as well. Definitely has better athleticism than you'd expect out of a Davidson big, and it's just the playmaking feel, the ability to finish at the basket, and some of the craft. He's not necessarily the most above the rim finisher, but he can give you some of that, like enough of that, so to speak. I like all the additions, but it is a little bit tough to get entirely on board with saying they're a top 25 team, surefire, when you realize it's a bunch of up transfers and DeVries' son. And I get Tucker was on NBA radars a few years ago to where he's still a really good player, but it does feel a little bit like nepotism plus a bunch of mid-major guys, and we hope it works out. That being said, I think there's a good chance that it will. I think Indiana should at least be a tournament team and wouldn't be surprised at all to see them ranked for a good chunk of the season.
Yep, absolutely. And with Indiana, I do think that there's quite a bit of upside there. I don't know if they're quite going to be able to live up to aspirations, but that's just because Indiana has such high aspirations every single year that it feels like almost nobody can live up to them as well. As joining me on the show, we do have Riley Davis, a man that always lives up to expectations. He's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and it's been a really interesting offseason in just so many landscapes. Riley, I know that last time you were on, we talked a lot about North Carolina, sort of their upside, and then when it comes to the ACC, we did see a few coaching hires I really like over at Virginia, over at NC State, but I don't know if you have this fear about the conference, but I feel like the ACC might have the same issue that they've had the last few years. That's where they have a few rock-solid teams. You've got Duke and North Carolina. I feel like now you've got a 3 through maybe 6 that can make the NCAA tournament, but the bottom teams, like your Boston Colleges, your Georgia Techs, I feel like they might bring the conference down once again this year.
Yeah, I think that's a good analysis. Boston College, their roster stinks. Outside of Donald Hand, there's not really anyone who you want to buy into. Maybe Jason Azamoda, just because he was a top 15 recruit once upon a time whose rankings fell. Maybe you see him as a post-hype sleeper there, but Cal's roster is really underwhelming. I think Chris Bell was one of my least favorite players to watch in the country last year and was one of their big offseason acquisitions. Florida State, there's some upside there with just the buzz with having a new coach, but they're sort of like Indiana in the sense that it's a bunch of up transfers and I would say a lower quality of up transfers as well. I don't know exactly how that's gonna fit. Georgia Tech at least has some talent with Jaden Mustaf. I thought he showed some flashes as a freshman. Bai Ndongo is one of the best front court players in the league. Muhammad Silla, he had some pedigree, was a fringe 5-star kid, but point guard play, shot creation, that's a concern for me as well. So I will say, I think that both Notre Dame and Virginia Tech have a chance to rebound nicely and maybe even get themselves on the bubble. I would probably feel a little bit better about Notre Dame getting on the bubble than Virginia Tech just because, well, both teams frankly lack enough ACC caliber players, but I think both programs had a renewed commitment financially and with resources to at least get a better roster. Like Virginia Tech straight up played with an A10 roster last year. It looked like it belonged at LaSalle. And this year they actually have some talent with the Greek point guard Neoklis Abdalas coming over. They have Toby Lawal coming back, who above the rim 4-man who could step out and shoot a little bit. And I know we talked about Hansberry at West Virginia. I think Hansberry profiles as a perfect Mike Young big. I'm still a Mike Young believer, but I really want to see him get it turned around now that there's actual resources being pumped into the program. And then I would say with Shrewsbury, it's a little bit like Diebler. Obviously, he's more accomplished. You go back a couple of years when he got Penn State to the big dance. But this feels like the year for Shrews to prove that he's the right man for the job. You get Marcus Burton back, who is likely the best guard in the conference, Greg, unless there's a freshman. Yeah, really, unless there's a freshman who just lights it up. I think I'd give that title to Burton. You get him back for year 3. Many people probably didn't think that would happen. I would have expected him to portal by now. Didn't happen. You get Braden Shrewsbury back, and then you bring in the McDonald's All-American and Jalen Harrelson. There's enough talent here in the league. I would say there's enough question marks in the league where they could emerge over pretty much any team that's not Duke, Louisville, Virginia, or UNC. I would even say there's a chance they could be better than an NC State or a Miami or SMU. I'm not really an infield believer. I think SMU is going to do that thing where they flirt with the bubble every year, then end up not close to the tournament picture. So there is opportunity to be found in this conference for the coaches who can seize it.
Yep, I think so as well. And I do think that there is quite a bit of intrigue with regards to a lot of these teams. And I think that Stanford is one of those teams, a team that obviously was a part of the Pac-12. They move on over to the ACC. Year number 1 was a little bit rough for them, but I do see some upside there. And how about if we talk about that a little bit more on the flip side with Riley Davis? And Riley also does a great job on the mid-major front. We're going to be asking him about some of the mid-majors that he's feeling a little bit bullish about and some of the teams that he thinks has some upside for the upcoming season. So we're going to be chatting about that next right here on Conspiracy with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beast Family Podcast.
Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack. Sure, you can post your job to some job board, but then all you can do is hope the right person comes along. Which is why you should try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them for you. Its powerful technology identifies people with the right experience and actively invites them to apply to your job. You get qualified candidates fast. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you what you're looking for. The needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. That's ZipRecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter.com/zip.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Cusco Seats with myself, Greg Eaps Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Great to be rejoined by this man as we've got Riley Davis aboard, doing great work over at HXCBB, Sleepers Media, and so much more. I know that he also does the Pot is a Roof podcast. That's all about North Carolina college basketball over at the Field of 68. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at his first name Riley_Davis, his last name, and then the number 3 altogether. And we were looking at some of these mid-tier teams out there in the ACC, and I do feel like this one is worth bringing up in Stanford, a team that they were in the NIT last year, but the NIT was looking a little bit different. But the one thing that stands out to me about Stanford is that they do bring back so much from last year. They lose Maximine Reynaud, but these guys like Chisholm Okpara, Ryan Archibald, I think that those are going to be some rock solid guys. I have question marks with regards to the backcourt. Can someone like an Ibuka Okori, who comes in as a freshman, be able to give you a bit of something along with Benny Geeler? But still, I take a look at Stanford, and I do like the fact that they've got some returning talent, and I think that that could serve them well, unlike what you were mentioning with regards to Cal and some of these other programs that really didn't add a lot in the portal.
Yeah, Stanford's a fascinating one to me just because, you mentioned Agarwal and Okpara, who were serviceable last year. I thought Agarwal definitely played well down the stretch of the season. He was pretty good in the ACC tournament. And Donovan Young, he was a freshman stretch four who he showed up in some big games. He played really well against UNC, knocked down a couple of threes. You mentioned some at the point guard position, though, and some of the question marks there. Jeremy Dent-Smith, I think, will get the crack to be the lead guard there. I believe he's a D2 transfer. And looking at his list, I know he was looking at some big West schools. There weren't a ton of power conference schools on him, but he was close to a 20-point per game scorer at the D2 level. So there is a little bit of upside there. I think he has the size to play at this level. He's not some undersized, like shot-making dynamo or anything that, you could see where it mattered less at a lower level. Yeah, I would say it's kind of tough to doubt Kyle Smith. Like, Stanford really exceeded expectations last year. They got great production out of Jalen Blakes, which I would say no one saw coming. Even Reynaud, All-American type numbers, all AC, like he was first team All-ACC and became a draft pick. I don't think anyone really saw that as a possibility this time last year, to where I wouldn't be surprised if he shattered the expectations again.
Yeah, and I do think that with this bunch, out of the teams that we sort of have question marks with in the ACC, they're one of the ones that I've got quite a bit of upside on, and I do feel relatively good about them. As joining me on the show, we do have Riley Davis, who does such great work over at eCheck CBB. And Riley, I know that in the past, you've done a great job of taking a look at some of these mid-majors as well, and just sort of how do you take a look at the mid-major landscape and what might be provided moving forward out of some of these mid-major teams in your neck of the woods? Because I do find conferences like the SoCon, the Big South, there's becoming a little bit more of a divide between the haves and the have-nots, and that's good news for these teams like a High Point, for I know that they took a setback this offseason, but a UNC Greensboro, East Tennessee State, there are some teams out there that I feel like are really sticking some resources into basketball and are forming some good rosters for this upcoming season.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned High Point. It seems like even with Flynn Clayman stepping in for Alan Huss, they're not going to go anywhere. I think that's a really well-resourced program, and you can see it every year. They're getting guys who played at power conference schools. They got Conrad Martinez coming in this year. They're bringing Cameron Fletcher, who's somehow still in school. Cameron Fletcher had some moments for Florida State. Like, there were times where it looked like he could live up to the 5-star pedigree, and if Clayman continues to play similar to Alan Huss's style, where they get up and down the court and they have multiple guards who can play out of ball screens and they're creative with the actions they run, it'll still be a fun team to tune into. I mean, they've dominated the boards the last couple of years too with Jeslyn Bodo, so obviously not having someone of his size and his skill set in there they might take a step back there. But yeah, I'm very interested to see how they fare this year. And even staying in that league, I want to see if Mike Morrell and UNC Asheville kind of sees the power void that opens up now with Huss having departed. That, High Point has dominated the league in the regular season the past 2 years. I don't want people to forget about Morrell. Morrell was kind of he figured out something good before Huss took over at High Point. It's still a roster that has plenty of talent and a couple guys who have proven something at this level.
Yep, no question about it. I do think that we've got ourselves a lot of fun with regards to the Big South and with High Point. That is one of those big majors that I'm feeling really good and really bearish about. And are there a few off the radar that could be out there in the northeast part of the country, the southeast part of the country, just anywhere, but just a few mid-majors in general that are starting to catch your attention and you're feeling good about what they might be able to provide for this upcoming season?
So this one's, I would say, a little bit of a cheat, because it's not, I don't know if you would call them a true mid-major, but I really like what Florida Atlantic has done. They were a school last year, the kid Matas V, I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name, who transferred to Texas. Like, he was a breakout star really throughout league play in the AAC that you could see putting it all together in real time. And I think he could really ascend another level when he moves up to the power conferences. But they reloaded pretty well, looking at bringing in Caden Carlisle from Indiana. I know he had a really bad year, but I still love anytime you can take a guy who has shown he could be productive at the highest level and putting him down into a lower league and what he could put together there. And then Isaiah Elohim as well, someone who I liked a lot coming out of high school, who's now also moving down to the mid-major ranks. And I think Jake has showed that he has some real potential to be a good coach in that league. And I don't know, I'm just always looking to see for these mid-major coaches. And that's, you see the blessing of NIL, which maybe even FAU still benefiting from the Final Four run a couple years later, being able to get someone like a Baba Miller last year, Carlisle this year, who were highly touted recruits at one point, who are moving down to the level as maybe a reclamation project. And even if it's a 1-year rental before they try to go and play for a power conference school again, why not take that? Why not take that risk? Like, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But if it does, like, you kind of got to take it as a year-by-year process in the portal era with, what you can get done and even having a chance to win your league.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I think that some of these mid-majors, they do need to take those chances, and I'm right there with you. I thought that it was a really good year for them last year. I do think that they're going to be able to build something moving forward, and we always build a lot of upward momentum when you're aboard Riley, because Riley, I know you're doing such an amazing job taking a look at this great game of college basketball. You're dialed into a little bit of everything all 12 months out of the year. Love to get people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Follow along on Twitter at Riley_Davis3. Tune into my daily videos for Sleepers Media. Do a lot of content for them, and some writing as well for Heat Check CBB.
Absolutely, and Riley is doing such an amazing job of taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. So a big thanks to Riley for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Going to be continuing on with a whole bunch of conference previews as we've been really reining it in with regards to those, and I'm going to be hopefully having quite a few more up within the next few weeks, as we've been a little bit slow thus far with these, as typically I've had 1 or 2 more up on the board, but you know what, with only 31 conferences instead of 32 conferences for the second straight year, that helps out a little bit. So expect a lot of conference previews the next few weeks, and expect a fresh podcast every single day as I'm with you guys in the off season, which means I'm back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.